What's up, Bridge Youth? It's me again. I just want to talk to you about this thing real quick. I love this thing. Apple makes some amazing products. And the thing that I love about it the most is the apps that are inside of it. I'm going to give you my top 5 apps that I would say I almost can't live without. The first one, Instagram. I love Instagram. It's a cool social media platform. But the thing that I mainly use it for is to find out new things about like mountain biking or new things that are happening in the world that, or maybe in a hobby that I love. Instagram is pretty solid and pretty cool. And I get to hang out with you guys sometimes in a weird time like this. Another one, Spotify. I love my music. I gotta have music, especially when I'm driving in the car or hanging out in the garage, whatever. I love music, and Spotify, I love it. It's got great music on there. Another one, Strava. I don't know if you guys know what this is, but you know I love mountain biking, and Strava tracks down my mountain bike ride and tells me if I've gone faster or slower or how much better I'm getting as I ride certain trails and stuff. And I love seeing there and seeing my progress in how I do. Another one is Trail Forks. This is how I find new trails and new places to go to mountain bike and to explore and maybe go on a hike or something like that. But Trail Forks is an essential one for me. Last one, Apple Maps. You guys all have it if you got an iPhone. But for me, I don't really use it as much for directions. But if I need to just find a quick spot or maybe call a company real quick, I love using it because it's super fast. It's almost like a Safari, but to get in contact with things quickly. Those are my top 5. But now I'm going to get into a little more uncomfortable and kind of things we don't usually talk about. Top 5 things that churches usually don't like to talk about. And I bet you can guess some of them. The first one I'm going to say, sex. We all know that's an awkward one, and we all know it's kind of weird to sit there in a pew or your chair and listen to me talk about, or another pastor talk about sex. We don't like it. It's awkward and makes us all kind of weird. Another one, addiction. This one, I haven't really experienced much here in our youth group, but addiction is something that can be really uncomfortable to talk with, especially if, say, you're like me, a pastor who maybe struggles with addiction, or someone in the pew next to you is struggling with addiction. It makes it a little bit uncomfortable. Sexuality. That's a huge one in our nation and in our world today that we're all still, especially as Christians, figuring out, what do we do with this? How do we work around this or work with it or whatever? Sexuality is a definitely awkward and hard thing to talk about with the church. Another one, doubt. We don't like talking about doubt because, like, if you're me, a teacher, or you say you're a Christian, but you all of a sudden start doubting yourself and maybe doubting God, and is this weird or is this really real? That's something that people won't like to hear and won't like talking about if they are really, really hard Christians, and if they think their pastor or someone that they believe in leadership is doubting that. That's not something people like to hear. Another thing, loneliness. This one isn't more awkward or maybe something hard to talk about, but it can be a little uncomfortable if you're the one struggling with it and feel kind of called out. So those are my top 5 for kind of uncomfortable, awkward things to talk about that we don't like to in the church. Where am I going with this? We avoid talking about certain sins. We all don't like talking about certain things, and we all kind of have a simple solution, like, say, don't have sex. That's an easy thing to say for me to tell you not to have sex because I don't think you're old enough already, or maybe your parents are telling you the same thing. Easy to say. But what if in that conversation goes to pornography or sexual identity or unplanned pregnancy or abortion? Those conversations are way harder to talk about and not as easy as just saying don't have sex. Because once things like these happen, that's hard. That's someone who's working through that. That's someone who's dealing with something. You can't just give them a straight answer. You got to work with them. You got to talk with them. And it's not easy to do. Same with like something like drugs. I can say, don't do drugs. They're bad for you. I can say that's easy. That's an easy just statement. But what if I say that to someone who's struggling with a huge addiction with, say, methamphetamines? It's not going to be easy for them to just stop doing drugs. They might want to stop doing drugs, but with that addiction, that's not something easy at all. You got to walk with that person. You got to empathize with them and walk with them in their struggle. Put yourself in their shoes. It's not something as easy to just say, don't do this and don't do that. Why do we tend to, as a church, stay away from these kind of sin and this conversation? I'd say the first reason is we're afraid to think about it. Not all the time is there a straight, easy answer for a situation. Not all the time is there just an easy step-by-step process of this is how you deal with this. This is how you deal with drug addiction. You just follow this, it's fine. You'll have no issue. No, it's not that easy. You got to think. You got to work with them. You got to think outside the box sometimes. It's not an easy thing. Another thing that I think we tend to stay away from conversations like this is once you put that in the air and once you start talking about it, guess what? You got to act on it. And acting on something is very hard, especially if you're struggling with it or you're addicted to it or you're doubting yourself or you're feeling lonely. It's hard to say if your self-esteem is so shot low to put yourself out there again to try to make new friends. Or if your faith is so shot low, it's hard to not doubt and start believing again. That's something hard and not something I can just say, just do it. Like Nike would say. You can't just do it sometimes. So let's talk about this. John 8, verse 2 through 11. John chapter 8, verse 2 through 11. If you got your Bible, open it up and follow along with me. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" And they were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, All right, but the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." In this situation in John chapter 8, it's kind of a weird one because we're not used to maybe being in the streets and someone who messes up is threatened with the threat of being stoned. We've never dealt with that, but we've maybe been in that situation of the woman or the Pharisee or the crowd that's surrounding. I know myself, I've definitely been that woman. The person who's messed up, the person who's done wrong and deserves a punishment and deserves whatever I get. I've been there and I've done that. I've been the Pharisees who are demanding an answer, saying, no, they did me wrong or they did them wrong. They deserve a punishment. Why should they not go unpunished? I've been the Pharisee. And I've been the crowd that's surrounding and ready to throw the stone saying, yeah, you did that. You messed up. I've experienced that. I've been hurt by that. You deserve this rock that's coming at you. Think about yourself. Have you been the woman who's messed up? Have you been the Pharisee that really wants an answer to why something like this happened? Or have you been in the crowd where you think you deserve to throw a stone at someone who deserves it or someone who messed up and just they need to hear your mean word that you got to say to them? I got to ask you a couple questions and I'll answer them too. But as I ask them, I want you to think about this also. How do you think the Pharisees found out about the affair? I think a way they could have found out is maybe they saw the woman leave the house that she was in and she got caught in the act and someone told the authorities and said that she deserves punishment, she needs to get in trouble. That could have been a way. Why do you think the man who was with the woman in the passage was not brought to Jesus too? Why do you think the man wasn't there being ready to get stoned also? That's a little unfair because he committed this adultery also. I think at this time in the culture, men were considered higher than women, and so women were less than. And my opinion is that's probably why she was there and not the man, because she's less than, and in that culture time was considered less than, and she deserved the punishment, not the man. Why do you think the people in the crowd decided not to throw their rocks? I think the people in the crowd, because if I was there, I know I would feel condemned when Jesus said that. Everyone in that crowd has sinned or messed up just like that woman has. And when Jesus calls them out and said, fine, if you haven't sinned or done wrong like she has, throw the rock. None of us could do that. None of us could honestly say, I've never messed up like she has, and throw the rock. Last question. If you were in the crowd that day, what would you have done? I think if I was in that crowd, I would have definitely just walked away, dropped my stone, and probably felt a little embarrassed because I was so quick to just act and throw the stone. And yeah, I have probably been in a situation where I deserve the same thing. So in the story we read today, who do you identify the most, the woman, the Pharisee, or the crowd? And I'd say most of the time I identify with probably the crowd, where I'm ready just to throw a stone at someone who messes up and call out their faults and call out their issues, when in reality I have the same issues. I don't know if you are the same page as me and you feel the same way, or who you might relate with more, but think about that. Think about when a situation, maybe you have been one of those people and how it's affected you. But the crazy thing is, Jesus looks past her sin just as he would look past our sin. In that situation, he decides to take that woman by the hand, stand beside her, and say, I am someone perfect. He could have thrown the stone. He's never sinned. But he says, I have mercy on you. Go and sin no more. God has done that for you and I. Jesus has done that for you and I when he died on the cross. We just celebrated Easter a couple weeks ago. And we didn't deserve this grace and this all-abounding mercy and love like we get, like we are freely given. And a lot of times we take that for granted, and we decide to pick up stones, and we decide to call people out and demand a punishment to someone who has messed up, and we don't give the same mercy that Jesus has given us. And I want you to just remember that Jesus loves the sinner, and so should you and I. That's something that is hard and something we struggle with. And I want you to always remember that he loved the sinner and you, because you're a sinner and I am a sinner. So within this quarantine time, once we get out of quarantine, we get to hang out with each other. Remember, love each other, love your strangers that you walk past, love the outsider, love the person who's not welcome and cherished, welcome and love the sinner who's messed up and done horrible things, because one day you might need that, and one day you might need that love, and you always have it from Jesus, but it feels really great when you get it from another person. Guys, I just want to say I miss you so much. This has been a long time where we haven't been able to hang out and play cornhole, or you guys say lightning, I like knockout. When we play knockout, or just teasing each other and messing around. I miss you guys so much. And I hope you guys are enjoying your time. We'll be back soon to our normal rhythms, but I miss you. I love you. Have a great rest of your night.